somewhere along it. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I haven't been here in the Sangha for a long time. I'm very much sandwiched between daughters who have children and all kinds of health issues with children and grandchildren. And then I have ancient parents. My father turned 100 in June. My mom is 93. And so anyway, and all the other things of life. But it's very nice to be here with you all. Am I talking loud enough? I realize I'm not always good at that part. So I wanted to share with you a story that's been very much in my heart these last couple of weeks, because some part of it just happened. So I'm going to sort of tell you why I'm telling you a story, the story itself, and then some reflections on it. The why I'm going to tell you the story is because one of the people in our sanghas asked me a question. This was 2 weeks ago. It didn't make sense to me that he didn't want his legacy to be all the difficult things he had done that got him into prison. That's, he wanted to be remembered as and thought about as the person he's become, this very kind, thoughtful, generous person. And I was kind of going along with that. And then he said, I just want to bury the past. And that like really hooked me. Because I don't think we can bury our past, that doesn't, but we're not, you're not defined by the best or the worst. So bear with me. This is why I'm telling you this story. So when he said that, I don't know why, what popped into my head is the story of Angulimala. And I don't know how many of you know the story of Angulimala, but he was a person in the time of the Buddha. And there's different stories. I'm just going to tell you the parts of it that are relevant to me at the moment. So as to why did he do this? He became a man who decided he would murder 1,000 people. And he cut off one of their fingers. And, in order to carry all of this with him, he had this big chain around his neck, and he put a finger from each person he murdered. And he had gotten up to 999. And for whatever reason, he decided the Buddha would be his 1,000th person. So he's known to be coming for the Buddha, and the Buddha's, Sangha and disciples say, you can't go out on alms round, you have to hide, we need to protect you, don't do that. And the Buddha said, no, I will be fine, I will be safe. And he goes out in his alms to do his alms round, the collecting of food and money. And so, you can imagine him, this very stately, slow walking that he would be doing. And Angulimala sees him and comes after him. And Angulimala is described as being very big, muscular, strong person, right? So he's coming after the Buddha, and he's running, and he cannot get up to the Buddha, right? The Buddha's walking slowly. And Angulimala is trying, and he finally yells, which has always seemed to me really stupid. But anyway, he finally yells at the Buddha, and he says, hold still, I can't reach you. And the Buddha says, I am standing still. Not I'm standing still, but I am still. It's you who's still moving. And that always gives me chills. That the Buddha is still. He's not in the whole swirl of greed, anger, delusion. He's not chasing something. He's not avoiding something. The Buddha is still. And Angulimala is moving. And of course, as always happens in these stories, this, has the impact of deeply touching Angulimala and opens his mind in a certain way. And he asks if he can join the Buddhist Sangha. And the Buddha says, yes, of course. And so I think this is another really important point, right? The Buddha doesn't say no to anybody. There's another story where somebody has come who's done horrible things and wants to join the Sangha, and some of the elder monks are, sitting around saying, oh no, you've done this, then, you can't, you're too bad, you can't join. And the Buddha comes by and says, what's going on here? And the elder monks tell him, and he pauses, and he looks into the past lives of this person, and he says, oh, I can see that you did something wholesome like 5,000 lifetimes ago. It's fine, be in our Sangha, right? So the Buddha leaves no one out, in that same way that our practice leaves nothing out. There's nothing that we have to bury. There's nothing that we have to say, oh, this is okay, but whatever. But this is not the end of the story of Angulimala. So Angulimala becomes a monk, And he goes out on alms rounds, as everybody else does. But he's killed people in this area. And so people throw things at him. And this is very upsetting to him. And he comes back to the Buddha and he says, people are throwing things at me. What should I do? And the Buddha says, bear it. Bear it, Angulimala, bear it. Which I think is beautiful. He doesn't say anything else except that, right? We have so much in our lives that we simply need to bear. We don't have to have shame. We don't have to go through a whole, whatever, but bear it. But this is also not the end of the story. Angulimala, in one of his alms rounds, comes across a woman who's pregnant and in labor, giving birth, and suffering, screaming, crying, really suffering. And he runs back to the Buddha and says, I don't know what to do for this, this woman. And this is sort of seen as, well, this is sort of the beginning of his real empathy, right? And compassion and care. And the Buddha tells him something, I have to admit, I don't remember what, but he goes back and he sits with this woman while she gives birth. And in many traditional Buddhist countries, Angulimala is like the patron saint of pregnant women and childbirth. It was amazing to me when I first saw and he's got these fingers around his neck. I mean, he's not been transformed. These images of Angulimala in women, like in a women's clinic and in women's homes when they're pregnant. When I'm living in Sri Lanka, so it's this beautiful story, right, of the wholeness, of our wholeness. And so this man, he wants to bury his past. He can't. He has to bear it, just like each one of us has to bear the things that we've done, the wholesome things, the unwholesome things, skillful, unskillful, whatever. There's not an option to bury it. And we have to bear the results of those actions, right? There's the, I'm getting distracted here, but there's the 5 remembrances that you might chant every day if you want. And this is my cheat sheet version that I do every morning. This body is subject to old age, illness, and death. Everything I love and hold dear, I will be separated from. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my actions. So, right, we're all the owner of our karma, heir to our actions. It can't be buried or somehow whisked away. But then he goes on to be the patron saint. The patron, that's really a Christian way of saying it, but, the bodhisattva, he's the being who protects pregnant women in birth. Like, how beautiful is that? The person who was murdered almost 1,000, 999 people. That's not like a few. That's a lot of people. Becomes the protector of life and new life and helps to bring, new life into being. So to me, it's such a beautiful story about how we are all transformed and we're all transforming all the time. So that's sort of one part of it. I think the other thing is that people often will say, we're not defined by our worst actions, but we're also not defined by our best actions. Because I think really, when we sink into it, we're not defined, right? Who we are is a product of our family, our culture right around us, the world. We are impacted, by the racism, the climate change, the crazy media, the life and death of the people around us and how they understand things. So, where does any one of us begin and end? And so in a certain way, to try to say that we're defined by our best or worst, or we're not defined, in what way are we defined at all? And yet we're still accountable. And yet Angulimala, when he went out and people threw things at him, was told to bear it. And so, like so many things, I think in our practice, there's this tension or there's there's not a balancing point. There's not where it's like, there's my identity and the rest, and I can find that, it's like, it moves. So yeah, I mean, that's really I have more notes here, but I don't need to go on and on about it. But just to say that I think so much of the practice, the meditation is very important. The being mindful is very important, but so are the Eightfold Noble Path, and particularly the part of the path that tells us, the right speech, right action, right livelihood, how we are in the world, some of you said, I haven't heard that before, the we and us, how we are we and us, um, is to me as important, if not more important, part of our practice, which I also really like about Angulimala. And of course, at the end of the Angulimala story, his mind fully opens. He becomes an awakened being because apparently all beings in the presence of the Buddha who got written up in suttas somewhere or other had that experience. But it all really, I think, points to the way in which our practice transforms us and then continues to transform us, and how we are in the outer world is as important. So really, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. And if there's any questions about the story, I know some more pieces of it, but
Well, thank you, Ellen. That was beautiful. I'm sure that there is question.